Hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's presentation of OTF Connects, Blogging, Important Considerations for Students and Educators with Aviva Dunziger. And as always, we're thrilled to have everyone with us tonight, giving up some of your own time to learn more and different and share ways that you can increase learning in your classroom or just increase your own learning as well. And here's our map showing us all scattered across the province with our dear friends up to the north and way over to the east, and not too many way over to the west. We're kind of stopping over there in the Hamilton area. But it's a really nice spread, and we're always thrilled to have you with us, so thank you so much. And of course, thank you to Aviva, who is joining us again. Aviva has presented quite a few times in OTF Connects, and we're always thrilled to hear from Aviva, especially on the various topics that she delves into with her class and just through her own professional learning. So I will hand things over to Aviva, and she will take us away this night.
Thanks, Louise, and thanks for inviting me here today, and thank you everyone else for joining in, especially just after coming back after the March break. I hope everyone had a really good one. We're definitely talking about one of my favorite topics tonight on blogging, and what I've done on this first slide is I've given you the links which Louise has just put in the chat box for my professional blog as well as my class blog, and then my email address as well. If you have any questions, please feel free. You can always email me or you can tweet me as well. I do check Twitter and email regularly, and I will get back to you for sure if there are any questions that come up, or if you have anything you want to share too. Even though I am quite a prolific blogger now, I've really only been blogging for about 5 or 6 years, and I'm always kind of learning new things in terms of how to use the different blogging tools for my own professional growth as well as to use in the classroom. So tonight's session is really going to focus on those couple of areas, and I'm hoping that people will add some of their own experiences into the chat box as well as their own questions and comments, and that can kind of guide the discussion for tonight, because I want to make this as useful as possible for everybody that's here. So to begin, I'd just like to get kind of a feel for what divisions people teach in, and if you don't really fit in one of those, if you want to even add your information in the chat box, you can do that as well. I know there are some people that are probably in multiple divisions here too, but if not, if you can select from the ABC drop-down menu where there used to be a green check mark, if you could just let me know, that would be great. Oh, I see there is a bunch of C's, a couple B's. Excellent. Special education, perfect. Perfect. C and D, perfect. Thanks. Now, in the chat box, this was a question I didn't ask, but I am kind of interested so I can gear things a little bit more. If people just wanted to write down if they've used a blog, or if they currently have a blog, I should say, and if it's a class blog, a professional blog, or both, if you could just make a little note in the chat box, that would be great. I didn't ask it on the slides, but as I was going through them, I thought it would be nice to know. Personal class. Okay. Thanks. Okay, so it seems like there's, not only is there a nice spread between the division levels, there also seems to be a nice spread between those people that are new to blogging and just maybe starting to think about may be beginning, as well as those people that seem to use blogs quite a bit. And I'm hoping that those that are using it, even if you're just starting or if you are quite prolific with blogging, that you'll also jump in through the chat box, or if you want to pick up the microphone afterwards as well, to share some of your experiences with it. I should say that I do currently teach grade 1, but I came from teaching junior grades for the past couple of years, grades 5 and grade 6. I've taught down to kindergarten before, and I've done prep coverage for basically kindergarten to grade 6. And I've used blogs in different ways, either with family as well as my own reflections on a professional blog too, so it's kind of mixed. And even now, while the majority of my professional blog reflections tend to be about my own grade 1 teaching experiences, I will say that I have been reflecting a little bit about the coding clubs that I've been doing at my school. And right now I'm doing a coding club with students in grade 4 to 8. So it's kind of given me that intermediate feel a little bit too. So hopefully this will help as we're kind of spreading out the discussion. But if you do have any other questions or you're not seeing what you're looking for, please do chime in here, and I will try to follow what's happening in the chat as well as the slides so that this can be the most useful for everyone. Okay, so to, I guess, get us started a bit more thinking about blogs, I would either ask, why do you use a blog, which some of you did answer, I know, in the chat box, or why might you consider using one? If you want to add in a comment either in the chat box, or if you want to grab that little A tool and start adding it to the text tool here, that would be great. For Helene, who said that you use a teacher website instead, I don't know if you want to either write down in the chat box or maybe even on the whiteboard too, maybe why you choose to use a website instead of a blog, if you've considered other options, or why you might be thinking about them. It'd be neat to know. I see lots of communicating, which is great. Collaboration, feedback. All lots of different ideas. Love that. The other thing, it's not one of the questions that's posed here, but if people wanted to share it too, and if you can't draw a box or type in, if you're having difficulty on the whiteboard, you can also just add it to the chat box as well, because that part will be saved to Diane. If there's anything that's holding you back from beginning blogging, or questions or concerns that you currently have, it would be neat to see what might be some of either the issues or concerns or questions or stumbling blocks when it comes to blogging, so that hopefully we can address that tonight too. Thanks, Parker. Wow. I love seeing this fill up. So, Helene, I'll be showing you some captions of my class blog tonight, as well as the professional one too. For me, I think the big difference between a blog and a website is that the blog allows for communication, where the website is just kind of giving of information. So especially when a lot of people, as they're adding here, are talking about that the reason they use their blog or that they're looking at using a blog is because of that interest in communicating with parents, with other educators. When we're using a website, we're just the ones giving the information. There isn't really that back and forth. But the blog opens up that possibility, and I think that that can be a very powerful and difference. You'll see with my own class blog that the actual look probably wouldn't look much different than when I used to have a website, which I always kept until the last couple of years when I made it a blog instead. So the actual format isn't much different. The difference is that there's a spot for comments, and I think that that's the piece that makes it maybe a little more powerful. And Parker, if you can't get into the box, don't worry about it. If you want to even just add some information here, in the chat window, all you need to do is just click your cursor in the little white box that should be underneath, type into it, and then press enter, and it will appear for you, Diane. So hopefully that will help. Okay. And student privacy is something that we're going to discuss too. Hold on. Diane, did you want to? There you go.
Is it the one with the A symbol?
Yeah.
Is that the one with the A symbol?
There should be. Yeah, there should be something that says chat.
Okay, is that the one with the big A? That one create a text label on the page? Is that the one I have to use?
Yes, that's the one that looks like a capital A on that little tool strip at the left-hand side.
That's right. And then I grab it there, I try to draw a box, it doesn't work.
Okay, sometimes the text tool doesn't work for everyone, in which case if you could just type all the things you want to share into the chat box, then we'll be able to capture it that way too.
Okay.
Thanks, Diane.
Okay, so it seems like there's lots of similar concerns when it comes to privacy, and that's certainly something that I considered as well. And having had many discussions and done many presentations when it comes to blogging, facilitated many different workshops as well, I know that this is a big topic of concern. Tonight I'll share some of my thoughts, some of the things that I do to kind of address this issue, but I know many others have tried different things, and I know that many different boards and places where people work have different policies as well. So hopefully, again, this will be a good place that if people wanted to jump in with their own experiences, that would be great. Because that will give us a chance to kind of share the different experiences. I think the board where I work is a little bit different than some of the other boards with people here tonight. I have to say, I just love the look of this slide right now. I've never seen so many different ideas shared, and it just looks awesome to see everybody just jumping in with all of their different ideas on how they use blogs, but also some of their concerns or questions too. So thank you. I hope we'll continue to have these kinds of good discussions tonight, because it is hard when you're kind of talking to yourself here right now. So seeing everybody chiming in with these ideas makes it awesome. So thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I think the majority of people have posted some ideas, is I'm going to move on, but by all means, keep adding information into the chat box if you have other questions or ideas as things go on. So one of the ideas that was shared was this whole idea of pedagogical documentation. And pedagogical documentation is certainly probably one of the biggest ways that I use our class blog. The class blog link is along the bottom of this slide. I know Louise will put it into the chat box. I'd like to try one of the tours tonight, if we can, to just look at this daily shoot part, because this is really where I try to capture the pedagogical documentation and really kind of take down through tweets and through my own comments the things that people and students have said and use it to inform my future practice. So that's what I'd like to talk a little bit about. And I use Storify for this piece that I just embed on it. Now I should say I currently am using our board blogging platform, which has switched servers. And so there's a few different kinks that they're trying to work out in it currently, which means sometimes you get routed to the wrong server and it will show up like there's an error, and other times not. So hopefully this web tour will work tonight, but if it's possible to do one of those, Louise, just to show, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll just jump on for a second and explain. So folks, where the slides were is now an actual web browser, and that is Aviva's class blog that's in there. So Aviva, whatever links you click on there, we will go to see, but if you need to instruct people to scroll down, they'll have to do that themselves. So if everyone could give me a green check mark if you see. There we go. The polling tool is now the green check mark underneath your name in the participants box. So let us know if you see Ms. Dunziger's class, a window into our learning.
And then I just got a, I think some people may have gotten what I just got as soon as I tried to move it, which is a security warning that came up. I don't know if anyone else just got that too. I tend to when we show this one. If you did, you can always click on the link if you wanted. Basically what I do is every day I take the tweets and videos and podcasts and pictures and student work samples and stuff that I've collected throughout the day, and I use Storify to give a little bit of context to it. And then I embed that Storify story on the class blog and send out a link to parents so that they can also see what's happening in the classroom. But in addition to seeing it, there's also questions that appear along the bottom where they can use those questions as ways to kind of extend the learning at home. And what I really try, I think there is a bit of a delay on the blog. Oh, hold on. Maybe, Louise, if you wanted to just take us out of the web tour, now I guess I can just have people click on it if there's issues. Thanks. That might make things a little bit easier. It's that one of the things that it does is it allows parents to kind of extend the learning if they want. But in terms of the pedagogical documentation piece, is it allows me to capture what students are saying, doing, looking at, engaging in during the day, listening back to the comments they're making, listening back to what they understand and maybe some of the questions that they still have, and hearing a little bit more in terms of where their interest lies to help kind of direct where I'm going next. And I say this because I'm a really big planner, and one of the things that appear on my class blog is every week I basically publish my planning minutes for the week, which is kind of a discussion, largely to myself because I use Explain Everything and kind of talk it out so people can hear it and see it, what I plan on doing throughout the week. I will say very rarely does my week actually look like what's shared there. And that's where the, oh awesome, thanks Amanda. That's where people can kind of look at those daily shoot blog posts to see how things change and to understand why I'm making the changes that I do. So in my comments, in the information that I give to kind of fill in the pictures, the videos, the podcasts, everything else, they can kind of understand, oh, this is why Aviva's made the change, because she heard this or she noticed students didn't understand this, and so therefore here's her new plan for tomorrow. And then parents can kind of follow along as they go. And Amanda, while it looks like it takes a really long time, I will say it usually takes me about 10 to 15 minutes to do the daily shoot blog post every night, because it follows kind of a format. And so I always talk about, yes, I promise you, 10 to 15 minutes. I even did it before I left school today, which is rare, because it follows a format. So I kind of know the way the format works, and I know the expectations enough to put in. I tend to just address the overall expectations in the brackets between kind of the math and language, and then I fill in with the science, the social studies, everything else, and I really just go with that. I upload the videos and pics because what I do is I take the pictures right in the Twitter app, which I tweet out all day, and in Storify you just drag those pics over, so it's really, really, really easy. For the videos, I basically capture the videos just using my iPad during the day, and I usually will upload it on my prep or maybe just on lunchtime while I'm running around doing something. I just upload the videos and then grab the links. It doesn't take very long. We have good Wi-Fi at our school, so it's not really a big deal. And same thing goes for the podcasts, which I actually do a ton of podcasting. Honestly, I like it the most, and I'll be dealing with that too today because I don't have to worry about faces. I don't have to worry about, you know, figuring out where am I going to put the camera. I can basically just put the iPad down, press record. The kids all know I'm going to do it, and just press record, talk, and I can kind of just totally ignore the rest, and we can just have a discussion. I can be moving around the classroom. I can, you know, point to a kid who may need to get redirected. None of that is actually captured for parents, but I have a chance to hear the discussion, and I don't feel like I'm focusing on the tool. And I think that sometimes what happens is when I'm trying to record a video, especially a longer one with a discussion, I get so involved trying to make sure that I don't capture certain faces or I don't get certain kids in it, that I'm focusing more on the tool than on the discussion, and I really want to capture that learning. So for me, the podcasting option works great, and all of it kind of comes together with Storify. And I'm so glad Louise put that in there because honestly, it is one of the greatest things I've ever used. It does not take long, looks very professional. When I've been having these little issues with my blog lately, I can even send the direct link to parents for the Storify story so they can see it right from there. They don't have to worry about going through the blog. And if you don't have a blog, in all honesty, parents can just follow along on the Storify. So your Storify can kind of become a blog. On Twitter, Jonathan So, who's at Mr. So Classroom, he uses Storify as well with his parents. He just tweets out the link. I only embed it on the blog because then parents that aren't following my Twitter stream can still see what's being shared. But it totally depends on what works best for you. It's basically like archiving those tweets and archiving everything that gets shared during the day, and then you're able to add the text to it as well. And yes, Parker totally loves the podcasting. Honestly, can't speak enough about it and probably use it the most in the classroom versus anything else. Podcasting has helped me a lot. And this piece also goes in with this whole concept of assessment for learning. For me, the tweets that I share, the stories that go together when each day it gives me time at the end of the day to kind of reflect and build that story, helps me not only see what the students are learning, because yes, this is capturing the individual things, but it also helps me put together that big picture to see, okay, this is what they get, this is what they don't understand, this is what they're interested in now, and this is where we need to go next. And that's that whole assessment for learning piece, because when it comes to the assessment, we can see everything that's happening, we can capture everything, but I think the key piece is that it's informing the instruction. And the blog, because everything's going together in one place, really helps you see that it's informing that instruction. And this is one of the examples. I actually had an example today with a similar type of thing. I just haven't had a chance to blog about it yet. Louise put the link to this post in. But we had a big cold stretch, which I'm sure everybody else here had too, and had what was easily a week, maybe 2 weeks of indoor recess. I don't know, it was just a really, really, really long time. And one day I happened to be in the classroom doing some work. And as I was doing the work while they were having indoor recess, I just noticed how into they were, like how into drama they were. And they wanted to make up plays, and they were trying to make costumes, and they were kind of dancing around. And as we were putting all of it together, I was like, oh, this is what we have to do. Drama is driving their math, it's driving their writing, it's, you know, making them want to read and tell stories. I thought this needs to be kind of our next focus. So it changed kind of the focus of the picture, the focus of the classroom, and changed our readers and writers workshop. And the changes that I made and why I made them are discussed in this post. Now, I do see a lot of questions here about the pictures and faces and stuff. So I'll explain now. It does come up a bit more later, but I know that it's hard to kind of ignore, so I will start. Our board policy does allow, if parents sign off, for them to post pictures of the child, which does include their face. That being said, I talk to every parent first about my plans, and I also explain how I'm going to keep the children safe. You will never see me match a picture with a child's face and the child's name. I usually only use initials on the blog. If I ever use a first name, even in a video or something, I will not be showing the student. I have one student in the class whose parents have asked not to have her face included, but they will let me show the student's work. They will let me upload podcasts with the student involved, so that does make my life easier. Or the child can be in a picture, but just not with her face. And so that's how I tend to capture kind of around, and that's why I do like the podcasting option, because I kind of avoid this. My blog is not password protected. It is public. It's out there, but I do really think that you need to find something that works for the parents and for you, and you've got to figure out which way that works. I do find myself taking more and more pictures of students that don't involve their faces, but that being said, I have discussed my plans with the parents, and the parents are completely on board. And I do think, in addition to getting a signature on a piece of paper, I think it's important to explain A, the rationale behind what you're going to share and why, and B, make sure that parents are okay with it, and if not, what parents will be okay with. Having these discussions first, I think, makes a really big impact in terms of how they feel afterwards, and in terms of their support of you and of that program. Okay. Now, this was one of the points that I raised a little bit earlier. I think it was with Helene, who had talked about having a website but not having a blog, and kind of the difference. So there's a couple of different points. One comes from the Daily Shoot blog post, and I do this every day for it. I always add in bold at the end of my blocks of time some examples of things that parents can do at home to extend the learning. This came out a little bit last year, and it came out based on a conversation that we had at a PD session with my principal, Paul, and my vice principal, Christy, at the time. And one of the things that had come up was the whole concept of homework, which is something that it seems to be one of those topics that people feel really strongly one way or the other on, in terms of having or not having homework. But one of the things that was discussed at our PD session was, well, why do parents want homework? And basically, they want to know what's happening in the classroom, and they want a way to be able to maybe extend that learning at home. So instead of having this enforced homework where some did it and some didn't do it and some wanted more, basically I used the blog that parents were reading as a way to give examples of things that they could do at home to extend the learning. And so I give them some prompts. People don't have to do it. It's not required. I don't have a checklist to say that they do, but the students know that they're there. often I discuss the prompts with the students first. And sometimes they even give me the prompts. They might even tell me something they'd like to do at home, and I'll say, oh, could I put that in tonight in our blog post as a homework activity, like as an extension for something you could do at home. And so then they're looking for it to do with their parents. And often I try to add some prompts that encourage them or give them the opportunity to bring in something the next day if they want to share. So that kind of helps out, and it gives me an idea of how many people are actually using these prompts to help extend the learning at home. Sometimes I'll add links and stuff to it. Here, Shelley had the thing of what do you do if a student doesn't have computer access. I currently work at probably the most inner city school in our board. Last year I worked at one of the most high income schools in the board, and at this point I have not had one student that has not either had access to a computer or a parent with a phone who was able to actually click on the link. If not, I would probably write down some of the ideas or print them off so that if parents wanted a chance to be able to extend it at home, they could. A couple of parents have asked me to print off a couple of the things just at the end of the week so they can see it because they don't get to check every day. So I kind of pick and choose and print off a few things that they can see. Our school also has a computer that parents can come in and access during the day if they would like, so that they can also see it from the school as well. And as I said, I do work at more of an inner city school, but we are part of our board's TLE project, which is Transforming Learning Everywhere, and it basically puts one-to-one devices for grades 4 to 8 students. And a lot of my students in grade 1 have siblings in grade 4 to 8. So they're also bringing devices home to use, which also gives options. Heather, your idea of the public library is also a great one as well. And as I said, a lot of parents nowadays also have phones. And so even though they don't have a computer, they can actually bring up this website and stuff on their phone as well, so they're able to access it. So even though I was concerned that this might become more of an issue, it really didn't become the issue that I thought that it might be. Now, that being said, one piece that comes from the homeschool connection is us maybe providing things through a blog for them to do at home. But the other piece that comes is the parent feedback back. And from grade 1 right to grade 6, I've been really fortunate to have parents that have commented on the posts. Now, I moderate comments, so I make sure that I approve them, read them first and then approve, because I've never not approved a comment, but if there was something that I thought was a little more private that I really wasn't sure I wanted to approve in that way, I might think it through before approving it, maybe just respond to the parent themselves. This is just a screenshot of one example of a comment that came back, but I think that it maybe speaks to the power of a blog versus a website, because what it allows for is that kind of feedback so that you hear what the parent's thinking. Students see that parents are reading it. My students know that that post goes out every day, and they often will come and tell me, oh, my mom or dad looked at this. So you can see that. And other parents are seeing it too, and they're starting to comment and reply as well. So it's kind of engaging them in the discussion. Instead of just giving them the information, we're giving them an actual voice in the classroom. And yes, it does definitely tie in. And in fact, on Twitter, Aaron Pulley, his Twitter name is @Blogeducation. He is currently back in the classroom. He teaches now intermediate, or not intermediate, I should say high school English in our board. But he used to be our parent and student engagement consultant and speaks a lot to this, and he was the one that actually suggested the use of these prompts, and coupled with what my principal and vice principal had said at our PD session, I thought it was a wonderful idea, and it really changed things when it came to it. Now, just as a little couple things, yes, the one-to-one devices for 4 to 8 is amazing. It has had its own growing pains this year. I am in a school with an incredibly high turnover rate. Basically, about 40 or more % of our students basically are constantly moving over. At one point, you basically had a point in your school in which every student you started with would have left. Now that's not currently happening, but it's pretty big. And so with that, I'm sure you can imagine that trying to collect devices and stuff that are going home becomes a little bit more complicated. But that being said, what the students are able to do with it is quite amazing. And because we do have a very high ESL population, a large number of students that have struggle in reading and writing, having those devices certainly help, and have certainly helped with the home connection because students are able to bring the devices home and show their parents what are happening at school. And that happens through the blog too. As for a negative comment, I actually haven't gotten one yet. I'm going to say if parents have something negative to say, they tend to send it to me, and in all honesty, I don't really get that either. Parents are happy to have the option. They like knowing what's happening in the classroom. They appreciate that things are being sent home, that there's extensions to be done. If anything, I just get more positive feedback. I haven't gotten negative. But if I did, if I really felt that it wasn't one to share, that's why I do moderate it, I could choose to just reply to the parent themselves, and I could choose to not approve the comment. On my professional blog, I have it set that after I've approved one comment, every other comment from that person is automatically approved. It automatically shows up. On my class blog, that's not the case. I have it set to approve each comment. So that way I can read the comment first before approving it. Now, I also use while the class blog is used largely as kind of that window into the classroom, my professional blog is different. For my professional blog, I use it for many reasons, one of which is reflection. Now, I'm going to say, and this is where it comes with the idea here of a negative comment, and not that I haven't gotten a negative comment with it, but what I will say is I do email my parents the link to my professional blog. I do have parents that have commented on my professional blog. That happens at my current school. It happened at my previous school as well. So I am very cognizant of what gets shared and how it gets shared. And I think that that's the piece. I do think reflection is important. I'll often blog about mistakes that I've made in the classroom. I'll often blog about ways that I'd like to change things around to make them better, or things that didn't work as well as I had hoped. And parents have never had a problem with that. They've always been really supportive of that. But that being said, I think that it's good to be aware that, you know, the word choice certainly matters when it comes to blogging, and I'm cognizant of that when I do reflect or when I do share maybe some of my frustrations, is thinking about how I'm going to word it so that I don't offend anybody, and that I'm also very aware of that audience as well. As for the one-to-one, they are tablets. They're all iPads. Our board is one-to-one with iPads. And there are apps that are downloaded on it, and people can download it from the App Store and stuff too. Okay, so while reflection is one piece that's shared, I also often use my blog for planning, which means that regularly I will post a blog post sharing kind of what's coming up before it actually happens. And what I like about this option is that I can then get some feedback from people before I begin. So people who've tried different things, people that maybe have some background in the topics that I'm going to discuss, can offer some feedback first, and then it can really kind of inform the practice before I've done it. I'm good with making mistakes. I make many of them, and I've started again many times, and all of my students know that we do start again because of maybe a way that I've taught something, because of the way that students maybe understand something, and I think, okay, they need more a review or whatever than what we've done. But all of that being said, I do think that there's value in trying to avoid some of the mistakes by maybe sharing the planning piece prior to actually doing it. And then what I will usually do afterwards is then reflect on how it went and think ahead, I guess, to some changes of what I would do if I were to do it again in a future year. And that idea links into this other way of sharing, which is that I do it for feedback. And this is an example of a post that I wrote where things didn't go as planned. I was really excited about this provocation. I was sure it was going to work. I was like confident on what students were going to share about it. But the issue was my students had a ton of things to share on this provocation, except they totally didn't interpret it the way that I thought they would. And basically, what I wanted to happen here is I had set up something in the classroom where I wanted to get students thinking about structures and the impact that weather and things can have on the structures. And so I had set up this provocation to kind of show a natural disaster of sorts, with the hope that students would start to talk about things that had come down and wrecked the structures and how does that impact on the types of materials we use when building. Well, I guess I had painted this house black and brown, and as far as my students were concerned, when they saw the black and brown house, all they could think of is that there was a fire. And one student said that there was a fire, and then everyone thought that there was a fire. And they had like a reason that everything connected back to the fire. So even though I kept pointing out different things, they couldn't get beyond the fire. And so I wanted students to get to a piece of learning that they didn't get to. And I know the value in inquiry and letting students kind of lead that discussion, but then I didn't know what to do with it. So as I was kind of thinking ahead and kind of reflecting on my own experiences, I thought maybe if I take it to my blog, people will have other things to share. And that's where that discussion in the comments were really valuable, because other people gave some ideas of what I could do to either direct the discussion back to what I wanted, to help build some schema so that the kids could maybe connect back to something different, or to just go with what I already had, so that because I was still getting to the main idea of the inquiry, even though they had taken it in a slightly different way. So I think that blogging about mistakes can be powerful, because it's not just our reflection on what happened, but it's also the value in the discussion that happens from that reflection. Okay, so are we talking blog followers, Amanda, or are you talking Twitter followers? Because I would say, okay, so blog. So I probably have about 30 blog followers, but a lot of people access my blog through my Twitter account, of which I have over 7,000. So, and most of them are teachers. Some of them are principals and vice principals. My previous vice principal, Christy Curie Bishop, is amazing. She is on Twitter. She does blog. I would suggest everybody follow her blog as well. But she often will chime in. She used to be a curriculum consultant, so she's really valuable on things like this. And sometimes what I'll do is I will tweet her, because I know that she'll chime in with some good questions for me or some other suggestions. And I used to work at the same school as her. I did move schools this year, but even moving has been a really great way for me to still connect with her, was through Twitter and through the blog. And she has been incredibly valuable. I also tweet my principal and vice principal, and they've also been really valuable. My principal doesn't always, and vice principal don't always respond publicly through Twitter. They do use Twitter. Sometimes they'll retweet or share the blog posts that I share, but many times they'll email me as well, or we'll have discussions afterwards about what was shared. And so it is a really nice way to still connect with them and get their feedback. And I also think that more teachers will offer feedback, or more administrators will offer feedback on blog posts if you do the same for them. The blogging community is kind of set up that, you know what, if you're not replying to any of their blog posts and you're not putting comments on, you're probably not getting a lot of comments on yours. But if you start to become a little more active in terms of giving comments, then other people do as well. And pretty soon, you're getting comments on your posts as well. If you look on my posts, sometimes I have no comments. Most of the time I have a few. Sometimes I have many comments. It totally depends on the topic and how, I guess, how current it is and what other people feel like it. I do also have many of the same people who will comment. Like Christy is probably one of my most prolific commenters. Jonathan So, Mr. So Classroom, who I shared before, he comments very regularly on my posts as well. I do have a couple people that follow my blog and comment on blog posts but are not on Twitter. But I do think sharing through Twitter is a really great way to get your ideas out there, and using certain hashtags also helps too. So sharing it, you know, to the first grade one if I'm blogging on something to do with grade 1, or Reggio PLC if I'm looking at something to do with like play-based and inquiry-based learning, or, you know, Ontario Social Studies, History, Geography, that hashtag, again, if it's something to do a little bit with inquiry. All of those help, and it gets the ideas out there a little bit more. So I really see a lot of value there, and I do think while initially I didn't necessarily have a lot of people that commented on posts, now I certainly have a few more. Also, my previous superintendent also reads my blog posts too, and she comments too, and again gives a new perspective. I think that's the other piece as well, is that it's important to have many different perspectives. And with comments, while I agree the comments are incredibly valuable, one of the things I had to really get used to, which I do see value in now, but I will admit was hard, is getting the negative comments as well as the positive. I needed to be okay that not everybody was going to agree with my perspective too. So while it is nice to get comments, I guess it is also good to be okay with a little bit of pushback too, and that also helps with the learning. And it's made me see things a little bit differently as well, but I will admit it was hard. Blogs are also great for goal setting. And often what I'll do is, on our board we have, yes, Doug is amazing, and certainly his list for bloggers is fantastic as well. So I'll happily give a shout out to Doug too. He's been great in terms of sharing too. Now, I guess with goal setting as well, it is one of the ways that I love to use my blog. Usually I will take whatever my annual learning plan goal is and I make it very visible. And what I will do is I will take that annual learning plan goal and I'll continue to kind of reflect on it throughout the year on the blog. This year I didn't blog about the annual learning plan goal per se, but instead what I blogged about is I did my one-word post. The one-word post, there's tons of people that do it. But I had heard about it from my previous superintendent, Sue Dunlop. I just put her Twitter handle in here. And she had blogged about her one word for 2015, like for the new year. And so I decided to do the same. And basically, I've used that one word to kind of frame a lot of my blog posts this year. And for me, my one word was getting uncomfortable. So uncomfortable was the word, but I needed to make it a little phrase. And talked a little bit about how I have gotten uncomfortable and things I've done that have maybe been a little bit more of a struggle and how they've gone and what kind of struggle I'm still going through. Sue and Christy, who are both great tweeters, I also have amazing blogs. So if you're looking to follow some other professional blogs as well, I would highly recommend those two. They are two of my favorite. Jonathan So too, he also has a great blog. It's on his Twitter handle as well. and he blogs usually a couple times a month, many on math. He is a great, great, great math person to follow if you're interested in math. He's helped me a ton in my math program too. So that's, again, this is where all of it kind of comes together. It's an amazing way to start making connections with other people. Now, lots of me talking, so now I'll give you kind of a chance to, is if you wanted to grab the text tool or even say something in the chat room on, I guess the other way of using a blog is as a digital portfolio of student work. So how might you use one as a digital portfolio, or how have you used one as such?
I'll jump in with fresh instructions on grabbing that text tool. So that little vertical tool strip on the left-hand side of your whiteboard. The fourth one from the top is the text tool, and when you click on that, it should make your cursor a typing tool. And the little black triangle in the corner of that tool will give you the second text option of just a plain capital A. The default is the A with the lines, which is a box, a text box. So either of those options is fine, and if you can't get that to function, go ahead and share in the chat.
Oh yes, the audience piece is huge when students are sharing work. I like the selecting of the work to share too. I've been using that video or audio piece more as well, especially with struggling readers or writers. Sometimes the writing piece on the blog can become a little overwhelming, or they're limited by what words they can write, so they may not share quite as much. Where if they add that video or audio piece, it really changes things too. Yeah, I like that most important work too. Oh, I love celebrations and reflections. Oh, what a great way to use that with the examples given too. And then looking back. That's awesome. I'm an occasional teacher. No, you can create one at home as well. We will look at blogging tools. There are a ton of different ones that are listed in here. Are you an occasional teacher, Diane, with the Hamilton Wentworth board, or with a different board? Because if you are with the Hamilton Wentworth, you may actually be able to use the Commons too if you'd like. But if not, like WordPress is a free blogging platform, EduBlogs is a free blogging platform, Blogspot is a free blogging platform. So yeah, so Weebly, actually I didn't put Weebly in there, but Weebly is awesome too, like quite easy to use as well.
There's a bunch of them in here. Weebly is the only one, and it will be coming up afterwards, but Weebly is the only one actually that I didn't. I think it's weebly.com. I will. Yep, here. Oh, thanks, Louise. And here's Weebly, which is actually one of the ones I didn't put in. So thanks. I'm trying to think who mentioned it here. Amanda, thanks for mentioning that one too, because it's actually one of the easier ones too. I haven't used it before, but I actually had a student who was blogging with our board blogging platform with me last year, and she decided over the summer she wanted to start her own blog, and instead of using the board blogging platform, she set up with her mom one of the Weebly ones too, and she's loved it. So again, it's nice to have some different options. Okay. So many of these ideas are, again, ones where people have already discussed them. These are just a few different examples if you're looking for it. One example is that whole idea of sharing photographs, videos, podcasts, screencasts. I use Snagit a lot for screencasts as well. The board has an account for it, so I'm able to kind of get one of the, I guess, upgraded accounts for Snagit. But there's a bunch. Jing is another good option too if you want to record what's happening on your screen. So in addition to podcasting or videos, one of the bonuses of a screencast, for instance, which I do actually use a lot, is say I put a picture up on the screen in the morning, which I might, that has to do with whatever we're learning during the day. I can basically capture that picture, and everything those students maybe write over top of the picture on the smartboard, everything they say, everything I type in is all captured as well, and it becomes like a little video recording that can then get played so that people can hear what's being discussed. And they can see what the students or what I've added to the picture. They can hear our conversation, but they don't actually see a video of us. So again, a nice way to avoid that whole issue of of privacy. I'm trying really hard to read kind of both the chat box and think at the same time, which I apologize because usually my ability to multitask like this is like a little much. I was just reading though what Shelley had said about seeing an example on the blog, and I did have an example in my Storify story from Monday on the daily shoot. So today's day 126, so on day 124, I guess, I did a screencast for our Math Talk Mondays, and basically I took one of the pictures that the students were discussing in small groups using the iPad. They were using Explain Everything on the iPad. I took one of the pictures at the end. I put it on the smartboard on Smart Notebook, and I led it in kind of a discussion group with the class to have, to answer some questions and kind of get us thinking about subtraction, which is where I wanted to go at the time with it. So I'm just going to throw the link to that in the blog. Oh, okay. So this is the link to the specific one, Shelley. Perfect. Thanks. I just threw it in there. And if you scroll through, you'll see some examples. I did put in a couple of Explain Everything examples. You can hear the students having their mini conversations, but you can also hear our class conversation as well. Totally love screencasting, and I do use it fairly regularly with the students with pictures or whatever that I put up on the blog, or sometimes even just to capture the writing and the discussion we're having. I was doing a writing mini lesson the other day, and we were looking at how to bump up our sentences. I was just writing on the smartboard, but I just, used Snagit to just grab a picture of the screen, and then as we were having the discussion, they were able to see that piece as well and hear our talking. Certainly sharing of student work is a great way. The Storify story works well for my grade 1 students because not all of them at this point are ready for like individual blogs. Some of them are still very beginning writers. Some of them are a little more confident, but really don't have the interest in doing the typing piece for it. They, as you can see here, like the idea of writing on the paper for it, which I think is great. They do like taking photographs of their work. They like when I take photographs and tweet out their work. They love having it shared in our daily shoot, but they like to have the choice of tools to use. And so being able to just share it through Storify, put it up on a class blog, but know that they can use whatever tools they want is great, and being able to capture some of that through the tweets and stuff I share just gives some context to what's being shared. Now, you can certainly do sharing of work with authors on a class blog. This is what I did the last time that I taught grade 1, which was 3 years ago, and I had to think about that, 2012, 3 years ago, and this is an example. So basically they used one of our board blogging platform, but we had a class blog, and this is just an example of what the grade 1s had written on the class blog. And they had decided to write a story during literacy centers. They wrote together. They were really into the idea of using quotation marks and having some discussion happening. So they worked together to write this piece, and then they published it. Really, really short, but just kind of a way to look back. One of the neat things is that I could click on the person who published the story, and I could see all of their posts, so that I also had a chance to look back and see the growth that that student has shown over the year. And growth is certainly one nice thing about the idea of using a blog as a portfolio, is that chance to actually see that growth. You can also do individual blogs. That particular group of grade 1s, they became quite prolific bloggers. Their skills were amazing. I was a 1-2 split, and my students really, really took off, and they actually ended up being administrators on their own blog. They used a WordPress, BuddyPress blogging platform, just like a regular WordPress one. And this is an example of an individual blog by one of my grade 1 students. So you can actually see what she wrote. She wrote all of this on her own. She edited it. All of the spelling was what she had decided to write. There are some errors, but she used the dictionary. She used our word wall. She made use of a book to get some of the ideas. She figured out how to do the paragraphs. All of that was her work as well. Not every student was like that, but this particular group did have quite a strong group of students, and you could certainly see that in the blog posts that they shared. The same thing was true for grade 5. So when I taught grade 5 last year, my students each had their own individual blogs. Some students chose to just publish privately. Some students chose to publish publicly. Some really liked the idea of reflecting on their blog, and some just wanted a chance to just quickly capture their work, share it with me, but they were not interested in the discussion that comes from it. So I think it's nice to have that kind of various types of options for them. So this is one example of a student. We had done an election as part of our classroom, and she decided to share a little bit about the classroom election and some of the issues and why we were doing it. And I do think that it is nice to have that choice, as Shelley said. And one of the things I like about our blogging platform is that they can have the choice. So I actually gave the students the choice and have given them the choice anytime that I've used it with them, so that they could decide, both them and their parents, on if they wanted their work shared publicly or not. This is another one, is the whole idea of reflecting, which is something that had come up as well during our discussions on the page and earlier on. And this is a student who reflected at the end of the energy unit. So I had given some questions for them to consider as part of the reflection. She chose to write her reflection on the blog because she wanted the chance to have a conversation. And you can really hear her voice in this blog post, which is very true of this student. She actually used her blog quite a bit. but felt very confident in terms of using it to engage in conversations with others, and really went back and forth with a number of people to answer their questions and stuff too. So not only did she reflect, but the questions that people asked also helped. I never had questions about comparing different students' work. You know what, I always tell parents, you're basically looking at improvements in your own child, right? If they're administrators on their own blog, the parents would just they would just click on the links for their own child's blog post. But it's really no different, I guess, than hanging a bunch of work in a classroom. I mean, when you hang work in a classroom, you're obviously going to see the difference in the students as well, and that offers comparison. And if parents really want to compare, what they should be comparing is their own child's work to the expectations for the child for that grade, or their own children's, I guess, individual growth. And that's really what I spent time talking to parents about before the blog, and talking to students about as well. It wasn't about them comparing themselves to others. It was a chance for them to look at their own growth during the year. And I think if we spend some time talking to students about the importance of that, then that message will also get translated home. If parents really want to compare, as some parents do, I think then the key piece to show is that, or I guess the key question is that even in a classroom, if you were going to hang up work, the parent's going to be able to compare their own students to other students as well, right? So I don't know if there's any real way around that. Maybe that's digitally out there. I guess that comes, again, to how you want to deal with it. It wasn't a concern for me, but if it is a concern, you could password protect the individual student's posts, so they could just see, basically the parent would just have access to their own child's work. Or you could choose to do a class blog and just kind of share various examples of work, but not put children's names on it, so parents can see everything. Maybe the child could point out their own work, but they wouldn't be able to actually say, oh yes, well my child's better than this other child, and actually have a name there for it, right? So I guess there could be some ways around that too. Perfect. Now, often what comes up too is this whole issue of devices. I know someone else mentioned the one-to-one, but you know, what do we do when we don't have that many devices and we want children to be sharing in this way? So there are a few different options. One, I had a LiveScribe pen, which I had when I taught 1-2. I still have a couple of them now. LiveScribes basically record anything that a student writes, as well as anything that's being said. And you can write and talk at the same time, or you can just do one or just do the other, draw, whatever. It's a big, it's kind of, it captures everything. It's a lot cheaper than a number of iPads and things like that, more in the $100 range than in, say, the $200 to $300 range. Some of the more recent ones are a little more expensive, more like $150, but sometimes you can get some secondhand ones as well. So I used to do a blogger's cafe, which was an idea that I got from the nerdy teacher on Twitter, and he had done one with his high school class, and I thought it was really neat. And we kind of did it as a way to capture what was happening during literacy centers or math centers. So as we were reviewing them, a couple people went to the blogger's cafe. They listened to what other people were sharing about what was happening in the centers. They wrote down their ideas, and they clicked record. So it recorded what people were discussing in terms of what they were supposed to do at those centers, as well as the ideas that were shared. And then this went on the blog so that parents, instead of getting my piece of information of what was happening at the centers, they would get the students writing and sharing orally about what they were doing. So it kind of gave that student voice piece. And it did so with a tool that didn't have us using, say, a computer or an iPad that we didn't necessarily have access to at the time. Another option is the great thing about an iPad in particular is that it will capture with pictures, right? Or a tablet of some sort is pictures or videos. So this is an example of a back channel that we did when we listened to a video on frogs. And then this was my grade 1-2 class, and students used everything from iPod touches to whiteboards to engage in discussion with each other, with themselves, while listening to a video on frogs. And then we put all of the pictures together so we could still hear the thinking, see the student work, share the learning with each other, but do so using many different tools, and everything still got shared online. And blogging as a writing center option is always great as well. You saw the earlier post from my Miss D blog from a while ago, which was some of my students that were writing, my grade 1 students writing. I had maybe 4 or 5 students blogging instead of having the whole class blog. And then I didn't have to use quite as many devices, but still had a chance for everyone to share. Microblogging, Twitter is also great. I've had a class account before. We've shared this as an example of when I used to host, like my students used to host weekly Twitter chats on different topics related to what we were learning, and other people would chime in with ideas and they would read them and then write back. And because it was really short, they could even like pair up and write and read together. A couple of them wrote on the smartboard. Some people might write their ideas on a piece of paper, take a picture and tweet it. So it just gave a few different options if we didn't have something for everyone. And again, a small group used to do it. And because Twitter only has 140 characters or less, they didn't have to worry about sharing quite as much to still get their ideas across. Now, I'll give a chance for some people to put ideas in here as well. I know a few have talked about ideas too, but I do want to make sure we deal with the blogging tools because I know that that piece is important for many who are considering the blogging. So what are some blogging tools that you've used or considered using before? Oh, thanks. The What Am I Twitter sessions were a lot of fun when they used to give descriptions, really good for descriptive words. I know there's still some grade 1 classes and stuff that do these Twitter chats too. I haven't really been using a class Twitter account with my students this year, but there are some who do. Kathy Cassidy has a class account. Karen Lierenman has a class account. And Mrs. Wadeen also has one. I think they just tweeted one the other day, and I think Kathy actually tweeted a link to a whole bunch of other people that also have class accounts. You can also look on First Chat if you want to find other people if you're thinking that that would be something you'd like. Oh, Edmodo, that's a good one. I didn't put Edmodo in there either, but that's a good private platform if you're looking for blogging too. So Edmodo is one as well. Thank you. Glad we put up this discussion here because I obviously missed. I thought I got a number of them, but I obviously missed a number too. Twitchucate is another one like Edmodo. If you're working with younger students, I do find it a little bit easier, which I actually didn't put up. It functions much the same way. Mr. Aspinall, Brian Aspinall, who's on Twitter, he is actually the person behind Twitchucate. He created it, and being a teacher himself, he basically created a tool to use as part of the classroom, safe, secure. He has a lot of different tools, yes, and Metal as well, which is for learning skills, fantastic. I am kind of considering ways to use it with my grade 1s. I'm struggling a little bit in terms of how to use it best with them, but we have pulled it up together. I'm just kind of working my way through it. But Jonathan So has used it with his grade 2s, and I know there's lots of others that are using it as well. And many of you are teaching older students too, so for those teaching older students, and Metal would be a great option. And it would actually allow kind of blogging, but blogging on the idea of the learning skills. So you can actually sign up, and if you tweet Brian, he'll give you some information too. Okay, so for students to have a blog. So looking at the timing and stuff as well, I think I'll move on a little bit and I'll show some options. So EduBlogs would allow for student blogs as well as kid blog too. Twitchucate and Edmodo, which were both mentioned, they would allow for kind of private student blogging. It's a little bit different, I guess, than having the parent involved in exactly the same way, although Edmodo does allow for a parent code, which means that parents could be given the code for their individual child and just see their own child's work and the things that are being shared. So the concern as well with comparisons, this would alleviate that problem because the parent would only be seeing their own individual one. I've probably had blogs on just about all of these platforms before except for Tumblr. I always find Tumblr difficult when it comes to commenting, and I do think that commenting piece is big. The rest of them I've used before. I think Blogger for a professional blog is maybe a little bit easier than WordPress, although I do think WordPress allows for a little bit more. And while I have used all of these, right now I see the value in using our board blogging platform too to kind of hold on to that information year to year so that people can kind of see the growth in the student blogs, but for myself, to be able to support the board in terms of what they're doing, but also because of concerns regarding who owns and who holds the information, I think there's a lot of value to having that set up themselves too. So I do like that one. And thanks, Louise, for putting in that list. Yes, and password protected ones are great if you're looking for that one. Yes. Okay, so our board site is the Commons, and it's a WordPress BuddyPress site. So WordPress was one that was mentioned. BuddyPress allows for kind of, it's almost like Facebook type discussion. So you can have like little discussion groups instead of having just a blog as well, which would be private. And if people are interested in kind of setting up their own, and again, this goes into that whole concept of who owns the data, who's holding on to the data, there are a whole lot of discussions that evolve from some of the more public platforms in terms of that they can use that student data and people are concerned regarding it. So when you're hosting your own blog, you're kind of alleviating some of those concerns. If people are interested in maybe setting up their own as well, the bottom link here, the dev.commons.hwdsb.on.ca is a development site, and it goes through the whole process of setting up that whole blogging platform. So if there's anyone in here that really feels confident in setting up their own or interested in it for a board, there's lots of information there. Mr. Jared Bennett, who's on Twitter, he is the person kind of behind the Commons, and Aaron Pulley, who I mentioned before, he initially worked with Jared to kind of set up the site too. So the two of them have done a lot in terms of that site and getting everything started, and they're great to talk to if you do have questions about it. And we do have just a few minutes left, I guess, but that being said, I think this whole issue of public versus private blogs are ones that everyone kind of has a point of view on, so it might be nice to hear what others have to say on it. So how do you decide which options to choose, and what are some important points to consider? So if you have questions or comments regarding the privacy issue, please add in your ideas here as well with the text tool. And yes, it is absolutely awesome that our board has it. And Jared, who is on Twitter, is like, he's amazing in terms of, I've never had such good service in terms of helping people out with blogging issues, etc. So he's fantastic. And if you have questions, he's a fantastic one to ask as well. And yes, Shelley, everything is posted. I think it gets emailed to you as well, since you've also registered too. So you get everything. So you can see everything that's being shared here to go back to afterwards. Okay. And again, it's good to know what boards require. The other thing is that, and I don't know if it's true for your board or not, but when it says that it requires password protection and parent waiver, I'm assuming that's just for the student blogs. But what I wasn't sure about is if you wanted to, say, host your own professional blog, I'm guessing that it wouldn't necessarily need to be password protected if you don't want it to. Okay. Yes. One of the things, I mean, I've always had a public blog, even for students, but I have approved student posts before. So, and I do approve student comments as well. So that's one way around it, especially if there's any issues, is that by approving the posts and the comments, it gives you a chance to read it first before it goes up and becomes public. There's certainly a need for digital citizenship. There's a need to teach those skills too. I understand, like I totally understand both sides to this. I think that audience piece is huge, and it's big for me as a blogger, so I know it's big for the students too. And talking to the students, I see the value, even though right now we only have kind of a class blog for students. I see how much that audience matters to them. They want parents to read it. They're excited when other people respond back to them. When I, tweeted out pictures of some students writing their first sentences or writing their first stories, when other people responded back with "way to go" or "we're so proud of you," like those students beamed. I told them that, but for somebody else to notice that for them was huge. I've never had that negative feedback, but as I said, I do approve comments, and I'm very cognizant about the comments too. Even with Twitter, even though students will see me tweet things out, I don't pull up messages and things from others until I've read them first. So, I mean, I'm cognizant of what's getting shared that way as well. But I think for all the concern regarding the negative, there's a lot of positive that comes from it. There's also a lot of positive to get students to understand the value in writing for an audience, and how do we respond to feedback maybe contrary to what we think, and how do we take those next steps? How do we learn how to accept feedback from other people, and how do we respond? I think there's a lot of value to everything that comes with that. There's nothing wrong with approving comments first. And yes, when it comes to students, I will probably always approve every comment that goes up there, because I want to make sure that I read it first, and I want to try to eliminate problems by not approving. I can always choose not to approve. I can always choose to just respond to a parent or just respond by email to somebody who writes something instead of having it out there publicly. But if anything, while all the concerns are regarding that whole idea of making it public, if anything, I think you end up with far more positive feedback than you think. And last year when I had my teacher performance appraisal done, and I was worried, like I was concerned, I just think it's the nature of like a TPA, like it makes me feel like I want to throw up. I'm pretty sure I blogged with a subject line for a post fairly close to that, as I was kind of getting prepared for that whole idea of having someone come in. It's stressful. And those comments from parents were huge, because that was what admin saw. They saw what parents were saying about what was happening. That mattered to them. That gave them insight. And admin were a part of that piece too. And it was even powerful for my kids to get comments from the principal and vice principal on the post they wrote. One of my students wrote a blog post about closing down one of the local schools and a solution as part of our government unit, and she got a comment on her post from the superintendent, from the trustee, and from the principal and vice principal, she was thrilled. Like, that post was meaningful to her, and all of a sudden she thought she had a solution that other people were going to listen to maybe keep a school open. And for her, that was a big issue. That was a real issue for her. She wanted that school to stay open. She really thought that she had come up with a good solution to it. And to know that the superintendent, principal, and trustee were all replying to her was major. Like, she was like beyond thrilled to know that her post had gotten such attention. But, okay. But why can't we use these tools to have students learn? Like, I use my own device in the classroom, and I don't use it to check my email in the middle of class. I don't use it to respond to a text, but I use it to share student work. And I think that has some value. I know that there's different policies, and maybe we need to speak to people about the policies, but if we believe strongly enough that it's supporting not only the current learning, but it's also supporting where our practice is going, then I think maybe speaking to that can help shift policies. I mean, I taught in schools where lots of tools were blocked, but showing how we were going to use those tools to help students learn started to change what was blocked. And so I think the same could be true with the use of the cell phones, for instance. If we're looking at how we're going to be using it, maybe starting to question that policy can help bring about change. I don't know. Maybe there's other ways to bring about change. Maybe they do the work, capture it after, and tweet it out. I don't know. Like, I don't know if maybe they take a picture of it and you can tweet it afterwards. Like, maybe there's other ways around it. But I think it's good to ask, because as our government is bringing out monographs on things like, for instance, on things like pedagogical documentation, then it's important to be able to use some of these tools that are supporting things like pedagogical documentation, right? If we're looking at growing success and the importance of assessment for learning, then if we're using these tools for assessment for learning, I think that has value. And these are so much of what we said, right? It's providing that audience for student work. This is a mom and daughter having a conversation where she's asking questions, the other one's writing back. She knows other people are reading her work. You know, and these are some of the things we talked about, like keeping students safe. In this case, I see lots of hand pictures. I would never put a student's face and name together. I often use things like initials, so you'll see lots of just first initials, sometimes first and last. I know which ones they are. Parents have learned which ones they are. The students know which initials they use. They even start referring to each other in initials, so that we don't have to, so they don't have to worry about things like having people know their name and see their face. Like, they've learned about that importance of staying safe. And that's why I said, like, podcasts are one of my favorite. And this is an example of one, because you can hear the whole discussion, but you don't have to worry about actually capturing the students. And this is an example of training students to be safe. So you're going to hear this is one of the ways that we used to explain everything. It was part of a math discussion for Math Talk Mondays. But the students who are going back and forth are referring to each other just by the first initial in their name. So that just, again, it's helping them learn to be safe. It's not that they'll never make a mistake, but it's helping keep them that little bit safer. And I guess with just maybe a minute or two left before we're done, is what's something new that you have learned tonight that you're hoping to try, or that you plan on trying? Because I think there's benefits to kind of setting a goal, so I'm hoping that everyone learned something tonight to give a try. Yeah, and Moodle, sorry, I was just kind of looking back, and Moodle will, Twiducate may also be a little less likely to be blocked than some other sites as well. It sounds like Twitter, it has nothing to do with Twitter, it's just the way that it's shared. But it's another one that will be a little less likely to be blocked. And yeah, there's value in just jumping in, right? That's the whole idea of getting uncomfortable. Jump in. Like, what's the worst that can happen? If it doesn't work, don't continue. And I'll admit, some years I've used blogs all the time with my students and had one-to-one, and it's been awesome, and they blog consistently. And other years they're not as interested in the blogging, and they're happy to share their work. They're happy to have their work captured. Parents love to see the work, but reflecting in that public realm is not as much for them, so we come up with another option. That student voice piece is huge, right? So it's, you know what, give it a go, see what happens, and if it doesn't work, try again. And that's so nice. I'm so glad that you're going to give that a try. It's awesome to see that people are looking at creating things. And Storify love. Oh, safety. Hold on. There's a really, really good one, and I'm trying to think of. Is it WebSmarts? Hold on. I think it's WebSmarts. No, that's not it. It's not WebSmarts. I'm trying to think of the Media Smarts, maybe? That might be it. I think Media Smarts might be it in terms of safety of materials. The other one, our board, hold on, learning.commons, I think, wdsb.on.ca. With like 10 seconds or less, I'm going to see if I can find it. Our board put together a digital citizenship toolkit. It was set up, we basically used examples from grade 7 to 12 and brought it down to grade 4 to 6. But it could even be used in grades lower than that. Everything is there. It gives you actual digital citizenship lessons. It's linked to a whole bunch of other resources that you can use for younger grades as well if you're not in the same one. And it gives some examples of grade 7 to 12 ones that you can look at too. Common Sense Media is used a lot as well. Thank you. And Media Smarts too. So anyways, but the learning.commons one that's there, it has the whole digital citizenship toolkit. It's public. Anybody can use it. So you can give it a go and see what's available there, and hopefully you can find what you're looking for. I guess, yeah, it's just after 9 o'clock now, but I just wanted to thank everybody for such a great session tonight and for all of the contributions. That was awesome. It was so nice to see everybody chiming in. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. I'll jump on my mic now and say thank you as well, Aviva, and thank you to everyone. And before you leave, I know you're all rushing off, I do want to make sure you get a chance to fill out our feedback survey. Your feedback really does shape the OTF Connects program, so if you could take a minute or two to fill that out, the link's in the chat, or you can click on the big orange Google link in the center of the screen. Whatever you tell us you need, if we see critical mass there, we work very hard at making sure we offer what you request. And in that survey as well, you can also give us feedback about Aviva's session tonight and OTF Connects in general. And yes, we are incredibly grateful for the very rich discussion that everyone participated in which Aviva led so well. So thank you very much, Aviva, and thank you to everyone else. I'm also putting a link in the chat for the resource page for tonight, which you will also get via email. I'll also tweet it out in the morning. Everything is already on the resource page. You guys kept me hopping tonight. And it's all there, and the upcoming calendar. We do have, of course, more sessions coming up that may, you may have sparked some ideas that you can continue on with some of the other sessions. And we do, of course, have previous webinars that also touch a little bit on blogging and some of the other actual applications and the how-to technologies that were brought up tonight. And so please do take a moment and explore all the resources that are available to you. So thank you again, everyone, and we will see you again soon.